So I'm now going to hand over to Chris Hibbert from Bytes Software Services.
Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me? I'm sure you can. I forgot you can't speak back to me. So I'm just going to do 4 slides, and I'm going to hand over to Marlon from Snow. So really what I want to say now is, from a SAM perspective, there's lots of reasons why people are concerned about SAM, and hopefully, all of you today have got different reasons, potentially shared reasons why you want to find out a bit more about our asset management services. So it could be the fact that your business may be changing in terms of mergers, acquisitions. You could be going for IT change, server consolidation, virtualization, etc. And that does change licensing requirements. And indeed, some of our favorite vendors, Oracle, Microsoft, etc., change their licensing rules and keep us all on our toes. So that, that raises concerns, and we all want to then understand, well, are we okay, are we not okay, and how do I make the best of licenses I already own, and indeed potentially the ones I need to buy. So ultimately it does fall down to either saving money or ensuring that we're spending most appropriately, most efficiently. So from SAM, years ago everyone used to talk about compliance, and the way we see SAM now is as an asset life cycle. So it's not just about the compliance piece, it's about looking at what do our customers own, how are you going to procure, how are you going to deploy that technology and software, how do you maintain it, and then ultimately when it's kind of gone through its useful life, how do you retire it, or indeed when the individual that's got that technology doesn't require it anymore, how do we kind of reharvest that and then hopefully give it to another member in the organization. All of this is driving to ensuring that we are reducing our costs and maintaining or maximizing the use of the assets that we do own. So that's really what we see SAM about today. So that can deliver, various benefits to companies. So I've talked a lot about, financial cost savings and cost reduction, and that can come from, reharvesting or reusing software, but equally it can come from rationalizing your estate. So with technologies, we can look at, what's actually out there, what are people using, where are there overlaps in technology in terms of functionality. And that could be, for example, security applications, data storage applications, etc. So it's getting a full understanding of your estate to ensure that only the right technologies are out there under the right contract. So it could require some contract consolidation, particularly if you've got multiple business units, or a mixture of all of those things. I've always talked about cost avoidance as well. So what we try to do with our customers is help you understand, if you have got spare licenses out there that potentially could be used by new requests or for new requests, then given, making sure the processes are in place, the knowledge is in place, so the people in procurement or on service desk at their fingertips can make those decisions. So I think that could be my final slide. I just need to check. I think that's 3 or 4 slides I had to talk about today in terms of introduction. No, the final slide is Bytes service model. So in helping our customers address many parts of that asset life cycle, we split our business, our SAM service, into 5 core functions. As you can see there on the screen today, that starts off on the kind of entitlement contract side, so looking at contract licenses, etc., visibility of those. I mentioned consolidation, tracking of those contracts, ensuring there's a proactive renewal of those contracts as well. And indeed, what underpins that is understanding what's out in your estate. So that's inventory, both from a hardware and software perspective. And equally, where necessary, metering, so usage analysis. All of that information, so the contracts, the licenses, entitlement, the inventory, etc., all feed into understanding the license position or compliance management. And that can be used to then support things like cost avoidance, where you've got spare licenses, or indeed, if we do need to procure, what's the best way of procuring, and that's where procurement advisory comes in. Now, from a SAM perspective, the key word there is advisory. We advise our customers on what they need to do. It's ultimately down to yourselves, who and how you then obviously take that advice and procure. We do underpin those services either as one-off reviews and engagements for our customers, or indeed it could be over a longer-term managed service type arrangement. One of the key things, and the reason why we've got Marlon here today from Snow, is the tool that we use to cover lots of those areas is Snow software, and that underpins our managed service that we provide to our customers. And indeed, many of our customers have actually procured the software itself within their own organisations. So now I'd like to hand over to Marlon to just cover that technology, and hopefully you can have some questions at the end.
So first and foremost, thanks for giving us the opportunity to sort of just explain what Snow does and where we can add value. We've only got about 35 minutes, so what I wanted to focus on was 4 distinct areas where we believe we can add value and ultimately supports and underpins Bytes services that they offer, which Chris discussed. So if we break those down, ultimately the first component of any SAM engagement is typically the discovery side. And the challenges we see organizations face are the fact that they have multiple sources for discovery or scanning technology within their environment. Obviously, with multiple sources, the challenge comes in with inconsistency of data sets, which the SAM team need to analyze and ultimately need to try and make sense of. The other challenge we typically see is the fact that customers have limited discovery data. And when I say limited, that could be in the areas of multi-platform support with their current discovery or systems management tools. The inability to actually get any details from the virtual environments. As we understand, these days applications are delivered to end users in multiple formats. And a lot of organizations are still stuck with generic systems management tools who don't have the ability to discover in the virtual environments, whether that's VMware ESX, whether that's AppV or VDI, or whether it's Hypervisor, or whether it's Citrix. And so there's limited information that's getting fed back to the SAM team to ultimately deliver any compliance. And typically it's quite a manual process within most organizations in terms of collecting all this data from multiple inventory sources. And even those who do have some form of discovery, when they extract that information from, let's say, for example, Microsoft SCCM, and try and enter that data into a licensed repository, typically that data that they're extracting from SMS is also, or SCCM is also limited, which then impacts the ability to reconcile that discovery data with license entitlement. The other challenge that we see organizations face is typically around software recognition. Most organizations we engage with, and typically we're meeting about 600 customers a month around the world, and the biggest frustration customers face is their inability to actually make sense of the discovery data. And typically that's a manual process, and the challenge of that manual process is that it's an ever-moving target. And so software recognition of the discovery data is a massive challenge for organizations. The other challenge is having a central license repository. A lot of organizations have multiple sources, and it typically depends on which vendor you're speaking to them about. Some have online repositories. Most organizations still manage and track their licenses within spreadsheets or service management tools. But ultimately, a combination of these multiple repositories, lack of software recognition, i.e. making sense of the discovery data, creates an issue for organizations to ultimately demonstrate their compliance easily. And typically we find that the reconciliation piece is a point in time. And so organizations are largely driven by major true-ups with vendors, and typically only understand their compliance once a year on a number of vendors which they typically spend money with. But it's a difficult process and difficult to manage. The next part is the ability to actually optimize the environment. And organizations are typically struggling to optimize, one, because the license repository that they currently use has limited functionality with regards to managing software assurance or managing the different license metrics that you get out in the market today. Most organizations still believe that they can deliver some form of license management or optimization through their current systems management tools, or even their service management tools, which only typically manage per installation type licenses for software. And obviously, with the whole introduction of cloud, software as a service, when we go into the data center, looking at IBM licensing or Oracle licensing or even SQL licensing in a virtual environment, the complexity of understanding the license metrics behind what's installed is complicated. The other aspect is usage. Most organizations, I would say in this country, typically are renewing contracts still in this day and age based on what's installed rather than what's used. And there's a big sort of frustration when we talk to procurement people and then when we talk to technical people, is because the procurement and contracts people understand that there's a lot of money to be saved by changing their buying behavior to buy software and renew agreements based on what is used, but the limitation is on the discovery phase, i.e. organizations need to manually create policies within their systems management tools at an executable level to track the usage of an application. And typically there's only a handful of applications that are being metered, and in some instances none. Typically in most organizations that we engage with, we are surprised if there's more than 30 applications that they have active metering switched on for. And in most organizations, we're typically seeing an average of 400 to 600 commercially licensable applications. And so the challenge of actually moving forward around optimization is difficult. The ability to translate the usage information into pounds and pennies is difficult because of the limited usage in the first place, and then having to extract that information into spreadsheets and then trying to associate the cost is very complicated, and because of the manual processes included in that, typically people aren't doing it. And then it's actually driving these systems management tools harder in terms of using them for what they were designed for, in driving the installation and uninstallation of software. And a lot of times we find ourselves trying to explain why one would still need a license optimization tool where most people believe they can deliver this through systems management tools. And hopefully as we get through the product demonstration shortly, we will understand why we can add value on top of those systems and really make sure that you're getting the best value from those systems, whether it's Microsoft SCCM or Altiris or Landesk or BMC or HP or Tivoli, whatever you might be using. The other process that we see is important as part of our vision is ultimately the ability to look at trends, look at your purchasing, look at how you've improved your processes internally and how that's actually impacted your business on a cost-benefit perspective. Your ability to simulate your future agreements that you might consider, your ability to navigate when you're looking to change if there's major infrastructure projects and how that actually impacts your licensing. The ongoing evolution of license metrics and how complicated they're getting. Your ability to rely on a solution that will help you make better and informed purchase decisions or just decisions around broader infrastructure projects within your environment. License automation, linking your purchasing systems with your license management system, or getting a service that Chris was talking about, whereby if you procure your software through your service provider, that they aim to maintain that license purchase records within your license optimization solution, which ultimately delivers cost prevention. And typically what we're seeing is that a lot of organizations are still struggling to cover off the baseline, to really get their head around discovery and to really then have compliance on more than 2 or 3 vendors once a year. And ultimately we believe that a combination of our system and definitely underpinned with Bytes services, we could take you on a journey from the discovery to the cost prevention. What I'd like to do now is just highlight some of these 4 areas within the actual application in terms of how we can visualize that for you and how that's addressed within a solution. Now, we've all been around long enough to understand that there is no silver bullet. Ultimately, with regards to software asset management, you do need the people and the processes, but we hope that within our system we can take a lot of the manual processes and automate a lot of the discovery, a lot of the reconciliation, a lot of the reporting, which can really get you through that journey quicker than what you currently use. What we've tried to do with Snow is to develop a platform to address and reach out to a diverse user base. And what I mean by that is whether you're the group CIO or whether you are in procurement and not technical, that your needs would be met in a central repository and a central clean view of the actual application. And when you log into Snow, what you'll realize is that you have the ability to report on what applications you have within your infrastructure, what hardware. There's a lot of synergy these days between hardware, the underlying hardware, and the license entitlement requirements. Users, ultimately IT is delivering a piece of software to an end user. And getting a profile of what your users are using really empowers you as a business to make decisions on whether you should look more to the cloud or software as a service or change your buying behavior based on what your users are doing. Agreements, licenses, objects and reports. So if we look at the first challenge that I talked about, discovery, the most important part that I want to highlight is the fact that with the Snow agent, bearing in mind the Snow agent is about 5 megabytes in size, it can be deployed with your existing third-party distribution tools. There are a number of methods of deploying the Snow agent, and the Snow agent is a very lightweight and it's totally transparent to the end user. Now, once the agent is deployed, it would do a full hardware and software scan, and by default, it will also meter the usage of all applications. There's no requirement to manually maintain metering rules at an executable level, which will then get onto the optimization piece, which I'll cover shortly. But ultimately, also the fact that the Snow agent is multi-platform. So we have support for Wintel, Unix, HP UX, Solaris, Mac OS X, Linux. So we can give you coverage where you might not have coverage today. We also have the ability to help you cope with the virtual environment. So for instance, we can go into, most customers that we speak to have heavy investments or significant investments in VMware. So Snow has a VMware ESX scanner, which can scan your vCenter and visualize your virtual data center, i.e. how many ESX servers do you have within that data center? How many virtual machines? How many processor, or what processor type, the count, and the core processor count? Your ability to see which applications are being delivered from those ESX servers. Your ability to see which virtual machines. Your ability to tie the entitlement against that particular data center. Your ability to drill down onto that virtual machine and with no doubt understand what type of asset you're looking at, whether it's a virtual, whether it's a laptop, a desktop, a terminal. because the licensing might have an impact depending on what device the application is actually running on. Now, we have a EDP, which is an external data provider, which ultimately can connect to existing inventory resources within your environment, like Microsoft SCCM, LANDisk, Altiris, multiple different types of sources. Now, you can have a hybrid model where you use Snow Agent in your virtual environment, and we can connect to Snow or at least your existing inventory sources where you feel fit. The only thing I would tell you is that if your existing inventory source doesn't collect it, we can't visualize it. So it's important to make that decision, and when we come to optimization, I'll talk to you about the benefits of having the Snow Agent out there anyway. But if we continue down the discovery route, your ability to actually go and discover and track web applications. The cool thing about cloud is that you're typically compliant, right? You can only buy a 50-user license, 50 people can use the application. But what we want to do is empower IT to go back to procurement and say, out of the 50 that we're using, or at least that we purchased, we're only using 30. So actually look to reduce the cost on those cloud or web-based, whether it's external or internal, or whether it's delivered as a service. Your ability to identify your Citrix environment. You know, the amount of organizations that still don't have the ability to track the concurrent usage of applications across their Citrix environments is still astounding. It's been in our technology for years, and your ability to see that this particular application is installed on these Citrix servers, used by these users from these terminals, and ultimately track, you know, whether that is based on concurrent users or concurrent devices, how you want to track the usage, and enable things like secondary use rights so we don't double count, and so that we can actually reconcile your compliance accurately is important. Your ability to get into more detailed instances, like the more complex stuff like Oracle databases. Your ability to do the discovery and get the information that you need to optimize. So your ability to go and see that this particular Oracle database instance is running on this hardware. How many processes, whether it's virtual, what users have accessed this Oracle database, what option packs have been selected and what have been used. We all know the cost of a Oracle audit and the cost of each of these option packs and management packs. What features are you actually using? And the ability to dynamically produce the Oracle Server Worksheet. The discovery element is very important. We can go into the ability to go and look at an application, where it's installed, and identify whether it's installed as part of App V. So you can easily run reports, you know, show me all the virtual instances of applications. But if your current systems management tool or your current inventory sources don't collect this information, it really makes it impossible for you to deliver compliance for these particular vendors. And we've got support for Hyper-V, App-V, VDI. You know, your ability to get into the details on the discovery side. So if we look at a Microsoft SQL server hardware comparison, which is a standard report out of Snow, your ability to see the application, where it's running on, the hardware, how many processors, how many processor cores, whether it's covered by a data center license. The amount of organizations I speak to that manually need to produce this, primarily because of the discovery is so weak, is a cost internally to your business. And it slows you down, and it stops you from getting on with the journey that we disclosed with the initial part of Snow. So that's on the discovery element. So just to summarize that, multi-platform, we can bring your virtual world into your environment, into your license optimization solution. We have the ability to connect to other sources dynamically. When change occurs, It's automatically reflected within Snow License Manager. You don't have to manually export and import data and manually maintain multiple integration points, which could be a risk to your organization and the success, ultimately, of your SAM program. If we look at compliance, ultimately within the Snow application, we have the ability to import from the web UI your license entitlement, your contracts, your price lists, and this is part of the service that Bytes have the ability to deliver, and so that ultimately you can drive your business forward by having more robust conversations with your suppliers because you've got that detailed level of information. Once we've imported your entitlement, so this becomes your central repository, we can also deal with multi-currency, we can deal with global entities with multiple operating companies. So you might have a global SAM owner and local SAM owners within the region who purchase locally. So when you log on to Snow, it's defined based on your role. When we look at agreements, we can immediately see how many agreements you have. And let's pick a typical one, which is a Microsoft agreement. Once it's imported within Snow, you can go and see which products you've purchased against your agreement. The date, what type. So Snow has the ability to fully and automatically manage software assurance, upgrade and downgrade rights. The ability to actually, once it's imported, because we know what you've got installed, we also then have the ability to then just reconcile. So we can reconcile your data from the discovery with your entitlement to give you ultimately your license compliance reports, which you can go and automatically set up. So if you want your Microsoft compliance summary, you have the ability to schedule these reports. Once again, you don't have to have teams busy spending days on Fridays trying to cobble manual reports. It's very disheartening when you've got to extract information from a discovery source, make sense of it, manually reconcile that with a spreadsheet, manually apply software assurance, only to get to the point where things have changed within the environment, because you've just got to start that process again. And so any change that's happening within your environment is dynamically being reflected within Snow, and then you can just set your weekly reporting to be scheduled to the key stakeholders within your business. And we can work alongside Bytes and ultimately define those reports so that you just schedule and get the reports that you want from the system. I think the thing that we're most proud of within the Snow world is our software recognition service. A lot of people make big claims when it comes to software recognition, but the way that ours works is pretty unique. The key thing for us is, do we recognize what's in your environment? We couldn't care how many, our database is comprehensive, and I could spend the next 5 minutes giving and throwing numbers at you, but the reality of it is it doesn't really matter. The way the service is designed is it's designed to recognize the stuff that's not being recognized within your environment. So if we install Snow within your environment, there will be a percentage, whether it's 5 or 2% of the software in your estate that's not recognized out of the box. That dynamically gets fed to our software recognition service desk, which then analyze that, and it's a policy-based recognition, and then send an update to your platform and recognizes that software, and that's backed by an SLA. So, and by default, you get daily definition updates from all of our customers globally. We've got thousands of customers. We've got over 8 million devices managed, and ultimately we recognize between 4,000 and 6,000 new applications every month. So when you go and say, I want to go and see all my applications, you'll notice that when you're looking within the Snow repository, this is all recognized and rationalized information. You can see the total items is 1,106. If you were just going to get an extract from a systems management tool, there could be tens and tens of thousands of rows of data. Now within Snow, we can dynamically, as part of our service, differentiate between a commercial license and a non-commercial license. So you could say, actually, what I want to do is group all of my software by licensable, and you'll notice it comes down to 617 items. And then what you could say is, I want to group all of that by manufacturer, and now it's 158 items. And then you could go into what's my licensable Adobe as an example, and you can see that. So very quickly we help you navigate and break this sort of daunting task of trying to understand what you've got out there into manageable chunks so that you can move forward in a phased approach in gaining compliance on each of those vendors. And the devil's in the details. So we have the ability, in this example, which is quite common, if you use just a generic inventory tool, it might tell you that you've got 6 installations of Adobe Acrobat Professional. But if you then added your entitlement, and this is just a per installation entitlement, it would probably calculate that you've got a deficit of 3. Snow has the ability to understand that actually Adobe Acrobat 8 Professional was installed as part of Design Premium twice and part of Design Standard once, automatically. We can highlight on which computer it was installed as part of a bundle, and we can automatically go into an application and see which components were installed as part of that bundle. Most organizations these days have to manually build those bundles, and we all know that suite applications cost a lot of money, and people think that they need them, and ultimately they're not using all of those components. So giving you that ability to navigate into the details very quickly helps you with that. If you want to go and see which computers they're running on, if you want to drill down onto the computer, you click on the computer. So if you want to see who's using this computer, if you want to drill down onto the user, you have the ability to navigate within Snow, because you need that 360 view in order for you to make an informed purchase decision. So when it comes to compliance, we give you the central repository. We apply the software recognition. We give you the ability to ultimately schedule and automate your compliance reports for those particular vendors. When it comes to optimization, this is probably the part that I'm most excited about. Is when we get Snow deployed within a customer's environment on a project license or a proof of concept basis. And when we get to look at this particular alert, which ultimately states that you've got 328. So if we go back there, 328 applications that equate to over 2,500 separate installations that require licenses, do not have any usage against them. So what we do is we can differentiate. So first and foremost, without any configuration, we meter the usage of all applications so we can help you optimize. The second part, and that's across your virtual platforms and your generically locally installed software. So you're getting a real rich view. The software recognition is applied, so we can then differentiate that usage to stuff that you care about, i.e. commercially licensable software. And then we have the ability to drill down onto that and go and say, what's the total value of unused commercial software within our business? And typically what we find is within that 60 or 90-day period, we find the return on investment for our software. We haven't even started looking at all the services that Bytes offer around looking at your contracts in more detail, around where you can novate agreements or licenses or merge contracts or reduce stuff. And you can go into any particular application and you can see it's installed on these machines, it's used by these users. You can automatically see when they first used it, last used it, how many times they've run it, and the average use time. You can see, well, our current risk is $3,000 on this application, but we've got over £2,000 worth of unused. So guess what? We're going to drive Alteris, we're going to drive SCCM, we're going to drive HPD, we're going to drive the IBM system, we're going to drive whatever systems management tool you use to drive the uninstallation. Now within Snow you can connect Snow License Manager with Active Directory and drive the uninstallation of an application from Snow License Manager. So you do have the ability to complete that loop, but for most organizations they're still struggling to get to grips on the discovery element. The reporting, if we start looking at proactively helping you prevent cost savings, is you can define the alerts. A lot of systems are quite static. First of all, you need a PhD to get your head around using the application. And then you've got to look at this console for reporting, this console for hardware, this console for software, this console for this. What we've tried to do is keep it simplistic, but it's also very reactive. So what we want our customers to be able to do is be proactive. So what we want you to be able to do is automatically be notified when contracts are going to expire. We don't want you to find out that your contract's due to expire when the reseller phones you up and reminds you that it's going to expire in a week's time, because that doesn't give you enough time to analyze the usage, which you probably today don't have switched on. So that by default means that you probably just renew your agreement based on what you think you've got installed. So proactively being notified 60 days, 90 days before the time, analyzing the usage information, working closely with Bytes, looking at those agreements, and then renewing appropriately. Your ability to proactively be notified when software within your environment is not being used. Not when you're going through a true-up, not when you're going through an audit, and when you get that audit letter through, you then speak to an IT, and they tell you, John, sorry, we don't have usage switched on. We can switch it on today, but we've got to wait 6 months to collect some information. Well, I need the audit, we need to get through this audit within the next 2 months or a month. So being proactive, proactively being notified when people are popping up VMs in your data center. There's a lot of times technical people don't necessarily check with the SAM teams whether they've got the correct license entitlement to pop up the VM that's got a SQL Server data center license. And what we've tried to do is really, you can subscribe to RSS feeds, so you don't have to be sat in a console. A lot of systems, even license optimization tools, you can't get automated reports and you can't get automated alerts, because the only time it actually works is that when you log onto the system. There's a lot of activity and change occurring within your business which you need to know about, rather than you having to wait for it when you're opening up a particular console. This is just a high-level view. What we'd like you to do, if you're interested and you believe that we have the ability to add value, because I think that's the most important thing, is where can we add value in the discovery phase? Where aren't you getting any information? Where can we add value in the compliance? Are you doing manual reconciliations? Do you have manual software recognition? Where can we help you in the optimization? Well, your CIO is never going to approve, metering switched on within your current systems management tool because it's such a big and heavy client. Well, why not test the Snow agent, which is a lightweight agent which produces about, on a full scan, 50 to 60 kilobytes of data, delta scans 5 to 10 kilobytes of data, totally transparent to your end users, but it helps you change your buying behavior because it helps you save money. The only thing that I have seen in my experience is, in terms of getting buy-in from senior management, is when you are hitting your KPIs and compliance, and when you are talking about money that you can save. And the only place that you can save money is really around usage. And that's why I would encourage you to have a discussion with us to see whether we can run cost-saving initiatives within your environment, benchmarking your existing tools and testing it so that you can really get to that place where you have the ability to navigate. Reporting is very important. Your ability to get reports. The Snow application gives you the ability to slice data within reports, drop and drag columns. You can go and look at your infrastructure, and if you have to still migrate to Windows 7 or Windows 8, you can quickly go and see all my assets, in which part of the organization, what operating system. I can go into that country, I can see which operating systems. I can then go and overlay that data by saying, show me all the virtual. So you can share reports with people. You can schedule reports. We can create reports in the admin console. We have the ability to create reports for you and send it down to your platform as an update to really move you to that place where you are in that zone of cost prevention. Ultimately, as I said in the beginning, there's no silver bullet. But I do believe that we are on a journey of really automating and taking a lot of the pain away from people who do need to spend most of their days trying to deliver something that's extremely complex, but don't necessarily have that level of understanding at a senior management level. So with regards to those particular areas, I will finish off, but I just wanted to give people the opportunity to ask any questions that you might have. If you want a more detailed one-on-one deep dive into the product, more than happy. If you speak to your Bytes account manager, we'd be more than happy to arrange that. But thank you for your time, and I hope you found that useful.
Thank you very much, Marlon. So I'm now just going to open it up to any questions. So as I said at the beginning, if you do have any questions, then please do pop those into the questions box now, and we can then go through those. I know some people have already submitted some questions that have happened whilst Marlon was talking. So I'm just going to make a start with the first question that says, how does Snow handle IBM with all the different licensing models?
The cool thing, just to answer that question, the cool thing about this Snow application is first and foremost, we have the ability to take the data from ILMT into the Snow application. And then within the Snow application, we have a term which we have internally called custom compare values. So we're not necessarily restricted to any type of license. And we do have the ability to manage the PVU licensing within the Snow application and bring that data in from whether it's the Snow agent that can collect that on a platform or whether it's from ILMT. In order to explore that in more detail, I wouldn't mind booking a session with that particular customer who's asked the question, and we can just talk you through with one of our consultants in terms of how you can achieve that if you're already using Snow. So I know there's some customers who are on the call, and if you're not a user of Snow, we'd be more than happy to explore that with you.
Okay, lovely, thank you. And another question here, how do we configure Snow to capture applications installed via AppV, etc.? Is there a client config requirement?
That's quite a good question. The cool thing about capturing AppV today within Snow, I think within the configuration file of the agent is just AppV equals true, but I think that's set by default. So I think there's no configuration required in order for us to pick up whether an application is delivered via AppV.
Okay, and another question here, what is the cost of this software and is there a yearly maintenance charge?
Yes, there are two mechanisms of buying this software. You have the ability to buy it on a subscription basis. That could be on-premise or that could be delivered from the Bytes cloud platform. So there's no real infrastructure requirements on your side. That's a pretty static cost, annual static cost, so the cost is the same year on year. Obviously there are benefits in buying a multi-year agreement up front which reduces that cost, and then there's a perpetual option which means you install it locally within your environment, or Bytes do have the ability to actually host it on a separate virtual infrastructure for you, and that has an ongoing cost of 20% for the maintenance and support of the license fee. The cost of the license is really dependent on how many licenses you procure and what banding you fall into. The more licenses you buy, the cheaper the unit cost, and the cheaper the ongoing maintenance license or per unit cost is. So I would encourage you to speak to your Bytes account manager or to the Bytes SAM team, and I'm sure they'll be able to supply you with indication of costs for our software. I would probably like to add that you also have the ability to buy a project license. So maybe you're starting on this journey and you don't want to go and spend too much money because you're still on the beginning of that journey. So you do have the ability to buy a 60-day project license. That typically is quite insignificant in terms of cost. What we then do is deploy the software across your environment, and the objective really is working closely with Bytes in delivering a business case to further justify the ongoing spend, and that also gives the customer the ability to really make sure that the system is right for them and it meets their requirements, and ultimately it's really quite a cool way to build a sound business case, because you're taking actual figures from your own environment into that business case to further support the purchase of the software.
Lovely, thank you. And another question, given the increasingly contractual nature of software and the concept of internal recharging of software costs across business units, what's on the roadmap for SLM to maintain a history of software installations and usage, including for levers? It would be great if we could define a history retention period of, say, 2 years. This would be extremely useful for hardware history.
Great. I'm not sure if that's probably coming from a Snow customer. We do have our Snow user customer forum coming up. We'd like to have a chat with you about that. Our CTO will be at the event. If it's not something that we can do in the tool today, it's something that you could discuss with them, and I'm happy, I'm confident, and I'm sure that we'd be willing to listen and take you on that journey and hopefully deliver something that meets that requirement if it's not met today.
Okay, lovely, thank you.
If you just speak to your Bytes account manager, they'll give you some information.
I can make sure that gets passed on as well so that your account manager is aware of the questions that you've asked. Another question here, you mentioned being able to remove software via AD, if I understood correctly. Can you please elaborate a little bit more on how this works?
That's fine. So ultimately, if your current, the way it works is if your current distribution tool, whatever you're using, is linked to Active Directory in a certain way. I've got a white paper on this which I'm happy to share with Bytes, and they can send this across to whoever has got an interest in this. But what we can do is we can connect SLM to Active Directory, and then Active Directory is clearly connected to the distribution tool, which is then connected to the endpoint. Now, what you can configure SLM to do is then go onto a computer, right-click, and the option for uninstall will appear, and it will then send a command to Active Directory to remove that particular user or device from the policy of being able to use that software, and then ultimately get that distribution tool to perform the action, the actual uninstallation of that application. There's configuration involved. It's not just plug and play. And as I said, I'm more than happy to share the white paper which takes you through the process of getting that set up in your environment across to Bytes after our call today.
Okay, lovely, thank you. And another question here, how does it handle boxed products?
Boxed products within Snow is handled as any other. It's a standard form that we can manage within the actual application. It's a bit of a broad question, but if I understand the question correctly, if it's with regards to how do you manage the entitlement for that boxed product within Snow, it's as you'd manage any other application.
Brilliant, thank you. And another question here, what if I don't have SCCM agents?
You don't need SCCM agents. So just for clarity, ultimately you have two options. If you don't have a inventory source at all, you can use the Snow inventory system, which ultimately will do the collection and the discovery for you, which is all the hardware, all the software, and the usage of that software, and then populate the SLM, the Software License Management System, with that information. Before it gets processed into SLM, we apply the software recognition against that data. So being able to match that information with the manufacturer, the version, the edition, whether it's licensable, the application family it belongs to, the release date, whether it's part of a bundle, all of that rich information prior, so that when you're reporting within SLM, ultimately that's what you see. So there's no need for SCCM. However, if you do have SCCM, we do have a connector. I would say that if you are interested in compliance, connecting to SLM is fine. And sometimes politically that's the right thing to do, because you might struggle to get approval to deploy an agent. But if you're interested in optimization, because of the complexity of managing metering rules within SCCM, I would encourage you to use the Snow agent, which by default meters the usage of all applications. But there's no requirement for you to have SLM agents, or at least SCCM agents deployed within your environment.
Okay, lovely, thank you. There's also been a couple of questions about asking for estimated costs. So with regards to the people that have asked those questions, we'll take those offline and obviously get back to you out of the webinar so that we can give you obviously more of an accurate estimate with those costs. And we'll also make sure that a copy of the white paper is sent out to you along with the recording. So we'll make sure that all of you get that as well. So that's all of the questions for today. So thank you very much to Marlon and to Chris for presenting for us, and thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.